didn't ask for the man's name. Not yet. They walked in silence under the relentless rain, the billionaire's arm firmly supporting the limping veteran. The driver opened the door without a word, his eyes wide with the weight of whatever was unfolding. Inside the car, warmth met soaked skin. The billionaire offered a towel, and the man accepted it without pride, but not without hesitation. "What's your name?" he finally asked. The veteran cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant Elijah Moore, 3rd Battalion, 7th Infantry, retired, discarded." "You're not discarded, just misplaced," the billionaire replied, voice soft but charged with something unspoken. "And you?" Elijah asked, peering at the man's suit, his rings, his composure. "Call me Langston." The rest of the ride passed in silence, but not in stillness. Something heavy sat between them, like a wire tightening across time. Elijah was watching him, not as a man who needed help, but as a man trying to understand why someone like Langston would stop. The mansion wasn't just large. It was monumental, black steel gates, columns lined with gold trim, and a flagstone driveway that looked like it belonged to royalty. Elijah blinked at the guards as they nodded Langston through. Inside, the staff looked startled but said nothing. Langston led Elijah through the marble foyer, past portraits of African kings and Harlem Renaissance jazz legends, until they reached a quiet dining room lit by low amber lights. Langston didn't call the chef. He opened the fridge himself. He made grilled cheese and tomato soup. Elijah stared at the billionaire flipping bread in a pan, like a man who'd done it 1,000 times before. "Why are you doing this?" Elijah asked, finally. Langston didn't answer immediately. He handed him the sandwich, sat down, and waited for him to take the first bite. "Because once someone found me in the rain," he said, "and saved me before I forgot I was worth saving." Elijah didn't speak for a long time. He ate slowly, as if memorizing the taste. His eyes darted around the room, photos on the mantel, a plaque with a faded military insignia. One detail caught his attention, a framed purple heart, but the nameplate had been scratched off. "You serve?" Elijah asked, his voice suddenly alert. Langston looked down, a long time ago, but there was more in his eyes. A haunted flicker, a memory rising like a tide. They didn't speak again that night. Langston offered him a guest room, Egyptian cotton sheets, heated floors, warm towels. Elijah stood in the doorway for several minutes before stepping inside. For the first time in years, he slept without shivering. What neither of them knew, not yet, was that the next morning the world would come knocking, and what stood outside his mansion would turn this quiet act of kindness into a national reckoning. Langston was up before the sun, like always. Old military habit. Even with billions in the bank, some things never leave your system. He moved through his quiet mansion like a shadow-cold shower. Black coffee, protein bar. He scrolled through emails from Hong Kong, Dubai, London. Business never slept. But this morning, something felt ... off. He kept thinking about Elijah, the way the man looked last night. Hollow eyes, cracked lips, shoulders weighed down by more than just fatigue. And yet, even in that broken frame, there was something solid, like stone under rust. Langston didn't do that kind of thing often, taking people in. Hell, he barely let friends stay the night. But something about Elijah triggered something he hadn't felt in years. Respect, recognition. Like looking in a mirror from another life. He figured Elijah would sleep in. Man deserved it. So he headed to the front gate alone, like always, to grab the paper. Old school, yeah, but there was something grounding about holding it in his hands. That morning ritual. But as soon as he stepped outside, he froze. There were people outside. A lot of people. Not paparazzi, not protesters. Just ... people. Standing silently at the edge of his property, lined up along the main road. His mansion sat behind a quarter-mile-long drive, protected by thick iron gates and a team of highly trained security. But these folks weren't moving forward. They weren't shouting. No signs, no phones in the air. They were just standing, still, calm, unshakable. Langston narrowed his eyes. Every one of them had something in common: dog tags around their necks. Some old and rusted, others shining like they'd just been issued. Men, women, black, white, brown, old veterans in wheelchairs. Younger vets in pressed shirts. Some had canes. Others stood ramrod straight like they were still on active duty. His head of security ran up, out of breath. "Sir, this started an hour ago. We thought it was a mistake at first, maybe, a protest or something gone viral. But they just keep showing up. There's no violence, no yelling. They single quotes, peaceful, but they're here for you." Langston didn't say a word. He walked down the steps, robe still tied around his waist, slippers soaked by the dew. The guards moved to stop him, but he waved them off. He had to see this for himself. As he reached the gate, someone stepped forward from the crowd. Elijah, but he didn't look the same. Gone was the tangled beard, the ragged clothes. He'd shaved, cleaned up. His hair was trimmed, his shoulders pulled back like he was standing in formation. He wore a simple shirt, a dark jacket. In his hand, folded neatly, was a small American flag. Langston stared at him through the gate. Elijah nodded. "I told one guy what you did," he said. "One." He looked back at the crowd. Word got around. Langston looked past him. Thousands, at least 5,000 by the early estimate, lined up along the road, shoulder to shoulder, like they were protecting something. No chants, no demands, just presence. "Why are they here?" Langston asked, still trying to process. "You showed a vet dignity," Elijah said. "No cameras, no press, just real human respect. You think that goes unnoticed. You gave one man a warm meal and a place to sleep. But to us, that's everything." Langston swallowed hard. The last time he saw that many uniforms, he was standing on the other side of the world. He remembered the desert, the heat, the silence after gunfire, and the feeling of coming home to a country that forgot you the second you landed. His voice came out lower than usual. "I didn't do it to be seen." "We know," Elijah said. "That's why they came." One woman stepped forward, grey streak in her hair, cane in hand. "You saved one of ours," she said. "That makes you one of us." Langston didn't know what to say. Billion-dollar deals, easy. Boardroom battles, child's play, but this wall of gratitude standing on his lawn before sunrise. He felt small in the best way. He turned to his security chief. "No gates today, sir." "Open them." The iron groaned as the gates pulled wide. No one rushed in. No chaos, just calm. Langston walked toward Elijah and stopped just inches away. "You hungry?" Elijah smiled. "Always." Langston looked at the crowd. Anyone else want breakfast? Some laughter, some tears, but not a single step forward until he waved them in. That's when it began. They didn't come to take, they came to serve. Some offered help with repairs. Others started setting up folding chairs. Someone brought a grill. It turned into a quiet, makeshift gathering. No politics, no speeches. Just people remembering what it felt like to be seen. And in the middle of it all, Langston stood there, billionaire, veteran, brother, finally understanding that sometimes the smallest actions carry the biggest echoes. And this echo was about to shake the entire country. It was supposed to be a quiet thing. Just Langston, a few dozen vets on his lawn, flipping burgers, drinking coffee, sharing stories like they were back on base. No media, no interviews, just real connection. But of course, nothing stays quiet these days. By noon, someone posted a photo, a grainy shot from behind a tree, but you could see enough, a sea of veterans outside a billionaire's home, standing like a unit. In the center, two men side by side, one in designer sweats, the other in second-hand boots. The caption read, "This black billionaire fed one homeless vet. By morning, 5,000 of us showed up to back him up." That post exploded. Veteran groups reposted it. Civil rights pages picked it up. Then the mainstream news caught wind, and within hours, Langston's mansion was surrounded again, this time by cameras. CNN parked a van outside. Fox News sent a drone. TikTokers were already live streaming. But inside the gates, Langston shut it all down. He walked to the edge of the property, stopped at the line, and told the press, "This isn't a story. This is a family reunion. Let us have our peace." And then he turned his back on the cameras. That only made it go more viral. Headlines poured in. Mysterious black billionaire opens mansion to vets from homeless to honored. The man who started a movement, 5,000 veterans outside one house. WHY. They tried to dig into Langston's past, but good luck with that. Most of his records were sealed. People knew he was rich, sure. Real estate, tech investments, a few low-profile companies with high-yield returns, but nobody knew the full story. And that mystery, it made him even more magnetic. But inside, none of that mattered. Elijah sat on a bench near the garden, sipping sweet tea, finally smiling without apology. Two old vets helped fix a broken fence post. A woman in a wheelchair helped organize a quiet memorial corner where they placed photos of fallen brothers and sisters. It felt like sacred ground. Langston watched it all from the balcony. Quiet processing. His phone buzzed, non-stop calls from executives, mayors, even the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Everyone wanted a piece now. Speeches, awards, interviews. He ignored all of it. Instead, he walked down the steps, through the crowd, and sat next to Elijah again. "They think I planned this," Langston said. "You didn't have to. You lived it," Elijah replied. They sat in silence for a bit. Elijah pulled a worn photo from his jacket, 5 men in desert camo, standing under a tattered flag. One of them looked younger, leaner, but unmistakably Langston. "I knew I recognized your eyes," Elijah said. "Bravo Company, right?" Langston nodded. "Finally, no more dodging. Yeah, Bravo. I was there when the outpost got hit in 03. Elijah let out a long breath. "You're the one who pulled out LT Harris." Langston looked down, didn't pull him out in time. Elijah gripped his shoulder. "You were just a kid. We all were. But you did more than most." Langston hadn't spoken that name in years. LT Harris, 24, newly married. 2 months into deployment. Gone in seconds. He felt it all come rushing back. The sand, the sound, the silence after. That silence had followed him for decades. Money couldn't drown it. Success couldn't silence it. But somehow, right now, it felt quieter. "You think any of this matters?" Langston asked. opening gates, serving food. Elijah nodded slowly. Yeah, because no one else does. They sat in silence as another 100 veterans arrived. Not loud, not chaotic, just ... present. Some with walkers, some holding kids. One man limped in with a cane and a smile, holding a folded flag under one arm. That night, Langston made a decision. No speeches, no press, just a question. He stood on the mansion steps, looked out at the crowd, and said, "What do you need? Not what can I give, not what can I do for you, just what do you need?" And that changed everything. One vet said housing, another said healthcare. A woman asked for legal help to get custody of her son. Someone else said they needed therapy for the nightmares they still couldn't talk about. Langston listened. He didn't promise anything. He just wrote it all down. By midnight, there were over 5,000 names, 5,000 stories, 5,000 reasons why the system had failed people who gave everything for a country that gave back nothing. Langston wasn't a politician. He didn't trust most of them, but he had money. And more importantly, he had infrastructure, private planes, empty buildings, a cybersecurity firm, lawyers on retainer, connections from LA to DC, and now he had purpose. He looked around and realized something no boardroom or bank account had ever given him. He finally knew what he was built for. By the next morning, Langston's entire mansion had turned into something that didn't exist anywhere else in America. A sanctuary that felt like home, but ran like a mission. He didn't ask anyone for permission. He called up his operations director, a stone-cold fixer named Monique, former Delta Force intelligence, now running Langston's private holdings, and said 2 words: "We build." She didn't ask what. She just said, "Give me 72 hours. Monique showed up that afternoon in boots and a bomber jacket, with 3 laptops, a 6-person advance team, and blueprints for an emergency housing complex she'd drawn up on the plane. She looked at the backyard, the guest house, the side fields. "We can convert this into sleeping quarters for 200 in 3 days. More if you let me bring in the trucks." Langston nodded. Bring everything. Word spread fast. But this time, it wasn't through social media. It was through the vets themselves. One by one, they started stepping forward, offering skills. There were medics who volunteered to build a 24-hour care tent, a former Navy cook who ran industrial kitchens, a guy named Marcus who used to handle military logistics and started organizing everyone into teams like they were back on deployment. And just like that, Langston's estate became a war room, not for combat, but for rebuilding lives. Elijah became the unofficial voice, not because Langston put him in charge, but because people listened when he talked. He stood under a pop-up tent with a whiteboard, coordinating volunteer shifts and collecting stories. "We're not here for charity," Elijah told a group. "We're here to remind this country who we are, and what we still have left to give." Langston watched from a distance and saw something he hadn't seen in years: order, purpose, unity. That night, Langston took Monique to his private study, a room barely anyone ever entered. Hardwood walls, shelves stacked with redacted files, old journals, photos from the war. He poured them both a drink. "You ever think we'd end up back in the mud like this?" he asked. Monique smirked. "You were never gonna stay clean, Lang. Not after what we saw." They clinked glasses. Then he got serious. "This can't just be a feel-good week. It has to last. We need structure." She nodded. "We turn the mansion into phase 1, then we scale. You have abandoned properties all over the country. Let's start with 3 cities. Turn them into veteran response hubs. housing, health, legal, therapy. No red tape. Langston stared at her. You think we can really pull this off? Monique didn't blink. With your name, my network, and 5,000 soldiers ready to work. Yeah, we're building a new army. That phrase stuck in his head, a new army. But this one wasn't about war. This one was about healing. 2 days later, the blueprint was launched. Langston went online just once to post a short video. No fancy production, just him in a black t-shirt, sitting on the front steps. He looked directly at the camera. My name is Langston Ray. I served, I made money, and I almost forgot what I was supposed to do with it. But last week, I met one man who reminded me. Now 5,000 of his brothers and sisters are standing with him. We're building a network for veterans. By veterans, no politics, no games, just action. If you want to help, don't send money, show up. The video hit 5 million views in a day. Volunteers signed up from all 50 states. Veterans who hadn't spoken in years reached out to old units. Teachers offered their classrooms. Lawyers offered pro bono work. Even a few politicians tried to jump on board, but Langston shut that down real quick. This isn't about you, he told one senator. This is about them. By the end of the week, the first blueprint was in motion. Mansion Hub, temporary housing, triage medical, legal aid, therapy stations. Phoenix Hub, a 20,000 square foot warehouse being converted. Atlanta Hub, partnered with an abandoned VA building, reclaiming it without waiting for government red tape. Chicago Hub, a church basement opened 24/7, run by vets for vets. Langston called the project The Formation, a name Elijah suggested, because it felt like they were falling back into something solid, something protective, a new line, a new front. But not everyone loved it. Some media outlets tried to twist it. Black billionaire creates private military. Is this a cult of personality? Why are thousands of veterans taking orders from a man with no government oversight? Langston didn't flinch. He didn't respond. He just kept building. Elijah, though, he kept receipts. He started documenting every single success. Every vet rehoused. Every family reunited, every trauma session filled. He turned Langston's library into a data room. They can talk, Elijah said, but we'll show. And then, one night, something happened that changed everything again. A young woman knocked on the gate holding a flag and a photo of her brother. He'd served in Afghanistan. He'd come back, couldn't get help, and took his own life 2 years ago. She looked Langston in the eye and said, if he'd found this place, I think he'd still be here. Langston didn't say anything. He just opened the gate, took the photo from her hands, and added it to the memorial wall. Then he made a silent promise. No one else gets left behind. Not on his watch. The formation wasn't even 2 weeks old before the pushback came, fast, loud, and calculated. It started small. A few concerned citizens filed zoning complaints. Then a city inspector showed up unannounced, trying to shut down the Chicago Hub over code violations no one could explain. Langston didn't flinch. He had lawyers already lined up. But then it escalated. First, the mayor of a major city issued a press release calling the formation a well-meaning but unsanctioned effort that poses legal and security concerns. Translation: you're making us look bad. Then came the anonymous threats, emails, voicemails, even one letter mailed directly to the mansion. This ends, or we'll shut it down for you. Monique was ready for it. She ran full background checks, secured the servers, installed facial recognition gates at every hub, and hired vets from Langston's private security firm to run defense. "They're scared," she told him. "You're doing what they never had the balls to do." But Langston wasn't interested in a war. He was focused on the mission. Still, it started to wear on him, the weight, the expectations, the noise. Everyone suddenly had an opinion. Celebrities wanted to come. Billionaires offered donations, but only if they could put their name on the buildings. He turned all of them down, because this wasn't about clout. It was about Elijah. About every Elijah who never made it to a porch, who died under bridges, whose names never made the paper. And then one night, the worst news came. Elijah collapsed. He was helping build bunk beds at the Phoenix site when he passed out, mid-steps. They rushed him to a private clinic. Langston flew there within hours. Diagnosis: heart failure. Years of untreated stress, malnutrition, and trauma had caught up with him. Langston sat beside the bed, staring at the wires and machines. He hadn't cried in over a decade, but now he couldn't stop. Elijah woke up groggy. "I told you not to give me rich people food. My body didn't know what to do with it." Langston laughed through tears. "You scared the hell out of me, man. You think I'm gonna leave now? I just started living." Langston stayed with him all night. No press, no updates, just silence between two men who'd survived more than they ever admitted. And in that silence, Langston made another decision. This wasn't going to be a project anymore. It was going to be a movement with teeth. The next morning, he called every leader from the hubs: medics, cooks, lawyers, social workers, volunteers, and formed a war council. He stood at the head of the table and laid it out. They're gonna come harder now. Regulators, media, maybe worse. They're not used to us moving like this, without asking for permission, without waiting for funding, without kissing rings. So we gotta decide, are we building shelters, or are we building something that outlives all of us? One by one, hands hit the table. We're in. That same week, they incorporated the formation as a veteran-owned cooperative. No board, no shareholders, just operators and boots on the ground. They launched a secure app that allowed veterans to self-report needs, get matched with resources, and join hubs with a single tap. Monique partnered with a crypto security firm to keep the infrastructure untouchable. Every server was decentralized, every volunteer verified, every donation tracked, but most importantly, no one got paid at the top. Langston took no salary. Elijah refused one too. The people saw that, and that's when something wild happened. For the first time in over 20 years, enlistment in the military dropped, but enlistment in the formation surged. It wasn't just vets anymore. It was social workers, nurses, teachers, students, even retired cops. They didn't come for checks. They came to serve, because finally someone had built something real. But the more they grew, the more dangerous it got. And Langston was about to face a decision that would put everything on the line. His money, his freedom, maybe even his life. Because when you build something this powerful, the system doesn't just watch, it moves to stop you. It started with a call from an old friend, Troy Bennett, a former SEAL turned real estate tycoon. He and Langston had come up together in the trenches of investment deals, back when Langston was still building his first empire. Troy had always played the slick game, golf with senators, champagne with CEOs. But he was sharp, dangerous when cornered. And now he wanted to talk. Langston took the meeting, mostly out of respect. They met on the rooftop of a luxury condo Troy had just opened in Miami. Champagne already chilled, Steak brought out medium rare. Troy always had the charm turned up. "You're doing good things, Lang," he said, cutting into his meat. "But you're pissing off the wrong people." Langston sipped water. He wasn't in the mood for games. "That a warning?" Troy smiled. "That's a friend telling you you've got a target on your back." He leaned in. "You're making veterans too powerful, too united. Politicians don't like that. Defense contractors don't like that. Even the VA feels threatened." Langston didn't blink. "Good." Troy shook his head. "You think this is a revolution? It's not. It's a negotiation. And if you keep refusing to play ball, someone else is going to pull the rug." Langston stood up. "If that's all, I've got beds to build." But before he walked away, Troy dropped the real reason he'd called. "They're already inside." Langston stopped cold. "What?" "The formation. Someone's on your team, feeding intel to the feds. Don't know who. But they've been at your Phoenix hub for weeks." Langston didn't say a word. He just left. He flew back to Arizona that night, adrenaline rising. He called Monique Midair. By the time he landed, her team had eyes on every key player at the hub. 3 stood out. One guy named Owen Fields, ex-military contractor, smooth talker. Recently transferred from DC, his credentials were clean, maybe too clean. Monique ran a quiet surveillance op. No panic, no accusations. She watched movements, tapped encrypted communications, cross-checked phone logs, and then it dropped. Owen had sent over 84 encrypted reports to an unlisted government IP, photos of the formations, operations, funding, personnel, and even Langston's private routines. It was a setup. They weren't just watching him. They were building a case. The next morning, Langston gathered his council. "We've been compromised. There's a mole. They're trying to paint us as a threat. Domestic instability, paramilitary organizing, whatever angle they can use." Elijah looked exhausted, still recovering, but sharp as ever. "What's the plan?" Langston paused. He could go public, out the mole, create a media storm. But that would turn the formation into a circus. The vets would be caught in the crossfire. Distrust would rip through everything they'd built. So he chose another way. "We feed them a story, our story, not their version." That day, the formation released its first official documentary, short, raw, real. It opened with Elijah telling his story. The bench in the rain, the mansion, the silence of suffering. Then it showed the hubs, the services, the lives saved. Langston only appeared at the end. One line, standing in front of a folded flag wall. "This isn't a rebellion. It's a rescue mission." The film went viral within hours. Netflix called. Hulu offered distribution. Langston turned them all down. "Keep it free," he told Monique. "This isn't for profit. It's proof." Meanwhile, Owen was quietly removed. No press, no spectacle, just gone. Monique made sure the message was clear. "We know we're watching, too." But Langston wasn't stupid. He knew more would come. So he moved first. He called a press conference. For the first time, he invited media onto the property. They expected fire. Instead, they got facts. Langston stood calmly at the podium, surrounded by veterans, not guards, just people. Real people. "There's a narrative forming that we're dangerous, that we're building something to replace the government. Let me be clear, we're not replacing anything. We're filling in the gaps." He held up a list, names, dates, units. "These are the 327 veterans we've housed in the last 21 days. Here's who they are, what they needed, and what they were denied by the very systems meant to protect them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't grandstand. He just told the truth. If helping them makes us dangerous, then this country has forgotten who it belongs to. That clip alone got over 80 million views. And just like that, the narrative started to shift. Langston wasn't just a billionaire helping vets. He was a leader they couldn't control. And now the world was watching. But someone else was, too. Someone who'd been silent until now. Langston wasn't surprised when the letter came. No stamp, no return address, just a clean white envelope delivered to his private study by one of the security team. He opened it and read the first line. "You don't remember me, but I remember you." He sat down slowly. Letters didn't rattle him, but this one felt different. It wasn't a threat. It was something colder. A name signed at the bottom. Corporal Andre Trigger Johnson. Langston hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. He leaned back, staring at the wall, at the framed flag from Operation Dust Echo. That mission had turned a lot of boys into ghosts. Some came back broken. Some didn't come back at all. Trigger was one of the last he'd seen. Brilliant on the field. Reckless off it. The kind of soldier who made you feel safe when bullets were flying and deeply uneasy once the noise stopped. Langston had testified against him in a classified tribunal after Trigger crossed a line during a village raid. Details were sealed, and Langston had never spoken of it again. But the letter made it clear. Trigger hadn't forgotten, and now he wanted a meeting. Monique advised against it. We don't negotiate with ghosts, but Langston was tired of ghosts. He agreed under one condition. They meet in person, alone, no cameras, no wires. The location, an abandoned steel mill just outside St. Louis, a place no one would expect. Langston arrived first, dressed simple, hoodie, jeans, no security detail. Trigger walked in 20 minutes later. Same build, same eyes, but older, meaner. He wore civilian clothes, but his posture screamed military. Well damn, look who made it out the mud, Trigger said, smirking. Langston didn't smile. Why are you here? Trigger stepped closer. Because you've got something powerful now. And because I want in. Langston stayed still. You think I forgot what you did out there? Trigger's grin vanished. You think that makes me unworthy? Langston looked him dead in the eyes. I think it makes you dangerous. There was a long pause. Just two men, two pasts, and a pile of scars between them. Then Trigger said, I've changed. Langston raised an eyebrow. So have I. That's why I came. I see what you're building. I respect it. But you're gonna need someone who's not afraid to get their hands dirty when this thing goes sideways. Langston crossed his arms. And why now? Trigger's voice dropped. Because you're getting too close. You're making people nervous. And I know how this game works. You need someone who can see the bullet coming before it leaves the chamber. Langston didn't trust him. Not fully. But he knew this. If what Trigger said was true, if things were about to get violent, then he couldn't afford to walk blind into what was coming. This isn't a gang, Langston said. This is about rebuilding lives. Trigger nodded. Then let me be your firewall. Langston made no promises, but he left the door open just a crack. Back at the mansion, Elijah wasn't happy. That man's a ghost with a match. You're inviting fire into a powder room, Langston knew. But he also knew the game had changed. The letter wasn't the only warning. Two of the formation's suppliers had dropped out under pressure. A major construction partner pulled out without notice. Banks began reviewing accounts. It was coordinated. Langston didn't need confirmation. He'd been in boardrooms long enough to smell a takedown, but he wasn't afraid. He called another council meeting. If they come for me, this doesn't stop. You keep building, you keep serving, you keep moving forward. Elijah stood up. If they come for you, they come for all of us. The room echoed with quiet nods, but not everyone was convinced. Later that night, Langston got a call from one of the hub leads in Atlanta, a guy named Theo Young, passionate ex-Marine. He sounded shaken. "Lang, there's a leak on our end. I think we've been compromised too." Langston's stomach dropped. "Pull everyone back. Shut down for 48 hours. We audit everything." The next 48 hours were chaos. Encrypted files missing, footage deleted, paper trails rerouted. Monique traced the breach to an IP in Virginia, a known front for federal cyber ops. They were coming, but Langston had one thing they didn't: the people. He called for a national summit, not a protest, not a march, a gathering. Every formation hub, every member, every veteran who could make it. Location, DC. He rented out a massive field just outside the capital. No stage, no banners. Just a circle. He stood in the center, surrounded by over 15,000 people. And he said this: "They can shut down buildings, freeze accounts, run stories, but they can't erase what's already in motion. We are the formation, and we don't need permission to save our own." The crowd didn't cheer. They stood, silent, unmovable, like a new front line. But not all wars are fought with bullets. Some are fought with narratives. And the next strike would come from a place no one expected: Langston's blood. Langston hadn't seen his brother in 12 years. Last time they were in the same room, it ended in fists and silence. That kind of silence that doesn't come from hatred, but from disappointment so loud it drowns out everything else. Darius Ray, younger by 3 years, smarter by 5, more charming, more ambitious, and twice as ruthless. While Langston had built his empire with steel, sweat, and silence, Darius had taken the corporate route. Ivy League, hedge funds, government consulting, the golden child of the Ray family legacy. So when Langston saw Darius's face on the news, sitting across from a senator and calling the formation a well-intentioned but dangerously unregulated militia, it hit like a gut punch. He didn't even call first. He just sold out his own brother. On live television, the media ran with it instantly. Brother of billionaire breaks. Silence calls formation a threat to national order. Family rift at the center of America's fastest growing movement. Langston didn't react publicly. He knew better. But inside, he was seething. Elijah saw it before Langston even spoke. "You okay?" Langston shook his head. He knows what this is. He's been to the hubs. He knows we're saving lives. Then why do it? Langston paused. Because Darius doesn't care about lives. He cares about legacy. And right now, mine is louder than his. But that wasn't the worst part. What came next nearly broke him. Darius filed a legal injunction against Langston personally. He claimed that the estate housing the first hub, the mansion, was part of a disputed inheritance and that he had partial ownership. Legally, it was a long shot, but symbolically, it was devastating. The media painted it like Langston was stealing money from his own family to fund a rebellion. And worse, some vets began to doubt. If the founding ground of the formation was contested, what did that mean for the rest? Langston kept his face calm, but inside, he was unraveling. He called Monique, who was already drafting legal countermeasures. "It's a PR play," she said. "He knows he can't win the case. but he's trying to fracture your base. Make it look like you're not clean." Langston rubbed his temples. "I should have seen it coming." Elijah stepped into the room without knocking. "Then let's show them what clean looks like." Langston looked up. "You sure you're strong enough for this?" Elijah nodded. "I wasn't supposed to make it to 30. Everything after that is extra credit." They held a press briefing that night. Langston didn't go solo. He stood flanked by veterans, lawyers, doctors, teachers, every kind of person the formation had helped. And Elijah, he looked into the cameras and said, "My brother's fighting for reputation. We're fighting for survival. I won't apologize for choosing humanity over legacy. If that costs me everything, so be it." Then Elijah stepped forward and held up a folder. Inside, documents from 2 decades ago, detailing Langston's military service, medical discharge, and personal investment receipts, the ones he used to buy the estate outright. The only reason Langston owns that mansion is because the army forgot he existed, and he never stopped trying to earn his place again. The reporters froze. Because this wasn't just about property anymore. It was about redemption. Langston didn't want to talk to Darius after that, but Darius called anyway. "You should have included me," he said. "You could have helped," Langston replied. Long pause. "It's not too late," Darius said. "Sell the formation. Turn it into a non-profit. Let me help structure it. I can make it bulletproof." Langston clenched his jaw. "You want to make it safe. I want to make it matter." Click. He hung up. That night, as Langston walked the garden behind the mansion, Elijah joined him. "You ever think about quitting?" Langston took a deep breath. "Sometimes, but then I remember that kid in the rain." They stood in silence, until Elijah said something Langston would never forget. "You didn't save me, Lang. You reminded me I was still worth saving." It hit different, because for the first time, Langston realized this wasn't just about building something for others. It was about healing something in himself. The next morning, the court threw out Darius's injunction. Too weak, too transparent. Langston didn't gloat. He didn't tweet. He just went back to work. But now he understood something deeper. The real war wasn't against the system. It was against forgetting who you are. And as the formation crossed 50,000 members, with hubs in 22 cities, Langston knew the final battle was still ahead. It happened at 3:14 a.m. Langston was asleep for once, a deep, dreamless kind of sleep, the kind that only came when he felt some rare peace. But the call ripped him awake. Monique's voice was clipped, urgent. "Phoenix Hub's been hit." Langston sat up fast. Define hit. Explosion. Gas line was tampered with. Half the structure's gone. 3 wounded. 1 missing. He was dressed and airborne in 40 minutes. When he landed, the scene was chaos. Ash in the air. Sirens blaring. People crying, coughing, shouting. But it wasn't just the damage that hit Langston in the gut. It was the look in their eyes. Not fear, betrayal. Because for the first time, the formation hadn't protected them. Something had slipped through. Langston found Marcus, the ex-logistics guy, who now ran the Phoenix Hub like a military base, standing near the wreckage. Blood on his shirt. "It wasn't an accident," Marcus said, jaw tight. "Security logs were wiped. Someone let them in." Inside what was left of the medical wing, 2 nurses and 1 veteran were treated for burns. A third was still under debris when Langston got there, a 19-year-old kid named Jamie, just out of the Navy. They pulled him out 20 minutes later, gone. Langston didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just stood there in the smoke, hands clenched, as the weight settled in. This wasn't sabotage anymore. It was war. The media twisted it instantly. Explosion at veteran compound raises safety concerns. Radicalized networks. Domestic threats disguised as charity. Langston didn't take interviews. He didn't explain. He flew home and sat in the war room. Monique laid out the report. 2 suspects. No direct fingerprints. But I traced one of them back to a contractor hired by a federal watchdog group. No warrants, no accountability. And the footage, scrambled. Professional job. This wasn't just hate. It was strategic. Langston nodded. Then he looked at the board. A massive whiteboard covered in maps, schedules, and deployment plans. He grabbed a red marker and drew a circle around Phoenix. We rebuild, bigger, stronger, right on the same damn ground. Monique raised an eyebrow. You sure they want us scared? I want us visible. He made the call. Within 12 hours, hundreds of volunteers were on planes and buses heading to Phoenix. Not to protest, not to retaliate, to rebuild. And this time, they documented every nail, every dollar, every hand that helped. Elijah, still recovering but refusing to be sidelined, appeared in a live stream from the site. He stood in front of the ashes, holding Jamie's dog tags. You didn't just attack a building, you attacked a family. But families rebuild. We're still here. Millions watched. And then the donations poured in from everywhere. Small ones, huge ones, quiet ones, quiet ones. One woman donated her entire inheritance. A barbershop in Harlem sent half their weekly earnings. A kid in Detroit sent $8 and a note. This is for the people who make heroes feel like heroes again. Langston stood in the middle of it all, watching foundations being poured into scorched dirt, but the emotional weight that was heavier. Late that night, he sat with Elijah outside the trailer. Neither of them said much, until Elijah finally asked, "You ever wonder if you built something too big?" Langston thought about it. Thought about the moment he gave Elijah a sandwich in the rain. "No," he said. "I wonder if I built it too small." The next morning, Langston held a closed-door meeting with his inner circle. He looked every one of them in the eye. They want us tired. We get sharper. They want us quiet. We get louder. But this, he pointed to a photo of Jamie. This is the last time we bury one of our own without justice. Monique leaned forward. "What are you saying?" Langston paused. Then he said it. "We go legal. We go federal. We launch the largest veteran-led civil suit in U.S. history against any agency, contractor, or private group that touches our people." The room went quiet. Then Marcus broke it. "Let's burn the system down." Langston shook his head. "No, we build something they can't destroy. That's how we win by the end of the week." 86 lawyers, all veterans, had joined the task force. Langston called it the wall. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. It was protection. It was justice. It was what they never got when they came home. But now they had each other. And they had nothing left to lose. 1 year later, the mansion where it all started was now unrecognizable. Not because it had changed, but because it had grown into something far bigger than a home. Langston stood at the edge of the courtyard, looking out at a crowd of thousands. Veterans, families, civilians, kids, elders, media, diplomats, even lawmakers who once ignored him. All there for the ribbon cutting of the formation's new national headquarters. Elijah stood beside him, leaning on a cane now. His heart was still a ticking bomb. Too much damage done before help came. But he was alive, still sharp, still stubborn. "You know you built a damn city, right?" he said, smiling. Langston nodded. He hadn't spoken much lately, not out of sadness, but because for the first time he didn't need to say much. The work spoke louder. There were now 47 hubs across the country, over 140,000 veterans connected through the formation, thousands housed, dozens saved from suicide, hundreds reunited with families, tens of millions in pro bono legal wins, and no government handouts, no billionaire funders looking for credit, just people standing for each other. Langston took the mic. The crowd fell silent. He looked over the sea of faces and said, "I used to think legacy was something you left behind. But this is something we get to live inside. Applause, but soft, respectful, the kind of applause that felt like a promise." He continued, "When I helped one man in the rain, I didn't know it would bring 5,000 others to my door. But I'm glad it did, because now the doors are open for everyone." He paused, then turned toward the black granite wall behind him, etched with names. The Formation Memorial. At the top, "We will not forget ourselves again." Elijah stepped forward, took the mic for the first time in months. "They said we were too broken to be trusted, too angry to lead, too poor to build, too invisible to matter. But look around you. Look what happens when nobody gets left behind." Silence, then cheers. Real, roaring, chest-shaking cheers. Later, during the ceremony, Langston slipped away from the stage and walked behind the memorial wall. There, in a private alcove, sat a single bench. On it, a bronze plaque dedicated to Jamie and every voice they tried to silence. Langston sat down. He pulled a photo from his coat, an old one from war days. 5 men in dusty camo, one smiling just off frame, L.T. Harris. He laid it gently on the bench. "We finally came home," he whispered. Behind him, footsteps. Monique, she sat beside him and passed him a folder. "It's done. Inside, confirmation, every lawsuit filed. Every case moved forward. Government accountability hearings. Investigations. Whistleblower protections for veterans inside the formation. And one final document. A formal invitation from the President of the United States, Langston Ray. We would like to award you the Presidential Medal of Freedom." Langston smiled and closed the folder. "We don't need medals." Monique nodded. "I told them that. But it still looks good on a wall." He chuckled. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was carrying the weight alone. Later that evening, as the sun set, the entire field lit up with candles, a silent vigil for every name on the wall. Langston stood with Elijah, surrounded by the people they'd once fought beside, and the ones they fought for now. No speeches, just firelight, just family. Because this wasn't just a movement, it was a resurrection. One man, one act of kindness in the rain. 5,000 showed up. And from that moment, the system could never ignore them again. The formation stood, and it would never fall.